Good morning and welcome to our virtual class in your subject Fundamentals of Accounting Theory and Practice. This is the part 2 of that Fundamentals of Accounting. So our discussion this morning is the last topic that we have in this course, and this is the accounting for manufacturing operations. And I'm your professor, Susan Maminta from our East Rizal branch. In today's discussion, you will learn the following. You will learn to describe the nature of manufacturing type of business, enumerate and define manufacturing cost, enumerate and define the non-manufacturing costs, and enumerate and define the categories of manufacturing costs, enumerate and define the kinds of inventories of a manufacturing business, and learn to record the specific manufacturing expenses and of the okay, but this one is not included anymore in our discussion today. Okay, so we have these learning outcomes for today's discussion. So now let's have this introduction in this topic. The accounting process for a manufacturing type of business is similar with the merchandising and service type of business. But there will only be additional transactions. And these additional counts that you will be using. And of course, a longer financial statements and additional computations. Okay, so let's have first the different terminologies under this topic. The cost of goods manufactured is the total cost incurred for the finished goods that is completed during the period. While a manufacturing means production of goods or merchandise. You will also have this manufacturing cost. And this is the cost of producing a finished good. A non-manufacturing cost is a cost incurred outside the creation of finished product. Okay, so what is the nature of these manufacturing operations? Manufacturing refers to the production or a creation of a product. Manufacture came from the Latin word manufacere, which means make by hand. And mano means hands. So, facere, that is to make. So, in the nature of manufacturing operations, that we are creating a new product, and that is, you have to combine the raw materials plus the labor plus the overhead, and that is equal to the finished product. We have different manufacturing costs. Okay, we have these direct materials, that the materials that are consumed in producing a product. For example, you are engaged in a manufacturing of bread. Okay, so what will be your direct materials? These are the flour, the sugar, okay, the leavening agent. And what about if you are engaged in the manufacturing of a leather bag? Of course, your direct materials are these are the leather, these are the thread, these are the what do you call that? The zipper, okay? The snap, okay? So these are the direct materials. While direct labor, that is the labor cost associated with the process of producing the finished goods. So in the Philippines, it is normal that we call them factory workers. No? So the payroll that we paid, okay, or the wages received by the factory workers is categorized under direct labor. Well, a manufacturing overhead or factory overhead, these are the costs other than direct materials and direct labor. So not indirect materials and not indirect labor, but part of the manufacturing cost. This is what we call manufacturing overhead or factory overhead. So what are the example of this manufacturing overhead? The salaries of the supervisor. When there is a repair of the equipment used in the production, the factory utilities, the electricity, the water, okay, and even the depreciation of the non-current assets, or even the rental of the factory space. So those are example of manufacturing overhead that is included in the costing of the products. If we have manufacturing costs, we also have a non-manufacturing cost under a manufacturing type of business. So these are the expenses incurred outside production. Like what? Like the selling expense or distribution expense. Example, the advertising cost, the commissions, the storage cost, the shipping, and the delivery cost. And also, those that I have mentioned a while ago, that under selling expenses, but we have also general expenses. And these are the general and administrative expenses related to the administration or the management of the organization. Like what? The salaries of the executives, the salaries of the accounting department, the salaries of the research and development, and so on. There are different categories of the manufacturing costs. As I have said, manufacturing costs, we have the direct materials, direct labor, and the manufacturing overhead or factory overhead. Now, these three that are in the manufacturing costs can be categorized in the following. Okay, you can call the product cost. Yes, direct materials, direct labor, and the factory overhead. So these are the product costs. While inventory cost means the cost of a product or assigned to finished goods. Initially, they are considered as assets and eventually charged to expense. No? So you have that inventory of your direct materials. Okay, so that direct materials, okay, initially this is an asset, but as you use that, this can be formed now as a part of the expense in the cost of goods sold. If we are going to use the category of prime cost, these are the direct costs in the producing product, and this only covers the direct materials and direct labor. But using a category of conversion cost, that means you transform raw materials into finished products, and these are the direct labor and the manufacturing overhead. Okay, going back in these inventories. So we have different kinds of inventories in a manufacturing business. As I have said, raw materials, these are the unused direct materials that is at the beginning, it is an asset part, but once used, this can be turned into expense in the account of cost of goods sold. Now, for the different kinds of inventories in a manufacturing business, we have the raw materials, as I have said, and the goods in process or work in process. WIP. These are the jobs or works or goods still in process. For example, class, you are engaged in the manufacturing of leather bags. Now, the leather materials that was or that are in there in the warehouse, once delivered to the production department for manufacturing or in producing that leather bag, and this production department will cut this, of course, no? The leather materials will be cut, and then this will be sewn, and then pounding. Okay, so different series of works that they are categorized as work in process. No, once transferred from the warehouse to the production department, and it's now the raw materials will now be categorized as work in process job, or what we call WIP. Now, after this, in this process of work in process, and once finished, the inventory under this work in process will be now a finished goods inventory. And that is the completely manufactured and ready for sale. Okay, so in the manufacturing business, we have these three kinds of inventories. At first, it is the raw materials, and then it will be turned into a goods in process or work in process, and then it will be a finished goods. Recording specific manufacturing transactions like what? Okay, like the purchase of raw materials. Okay, in the purchase of raw materials, you debit the raw materials purchases, and you credit cash if it is paid in cash, or accounts payable if it is purchases on account. And then if it is a payment of freight for raw materials, you debit freight in and you credit cash because it is paid in cash. And what about if it is on account? Of course, you have to credit accounts payable. Another specific manufacturing transaction is the return of defective materials. If it is on account, of course, you have to debit the accounts payable and you credit the raw materials return and allowances. In the payment for labor, as I have said, this in the Philippines, we call them factory workers, and you debit the direct labor and you credit cash. But we have also the accrual of direct labor. Okay, these are for the unpaid labor cost at the cut-off period. So you have to take that up to have a accurate or correct value of our accounts. So in taking that up, you have to debit the direct labor and you credit the accrued direct labor. And that is the accrual of direct labor. The incurrence of manufacturing expenses. Okay, so what are the examples of manufacturing expenses? These are the indirect labor, okay, the factory repairs and maintenance. So indirect labor, like the salary of the supervisor, you charge that as indirect labor. The repairs and maintenance and the factory insurance, if there is, and the utilities expenses like the electricity or in the water, okay, and the factory rent. So all of this, you debit them and you credit cash because it is paid on cash. Now, we have also these closing entries. In closing the goods in process beginning, you have to debit the cost of goods manufactured and you credit the good in process beginning or the WIP, work in process beginning. And to close the goods in process or close the work in process ending, okay, you debit the goods in process and you credit the cost of goods manufactured. To close the balance of the cost of goods manufactured, you have to debit the cost of goods sold and you credit the cost of goods manufactured. And to close the finished goods inventory beginning, you debit the cost of goods sold and you credit the finished goods beginning. And in setting up the finished goods inventory ending, you debit the finished goods inventory ending and you credit the cost of goods sold. And in closing the cost of goods sold, and that you are going to use a temporary account, and that is revenue and expense summary account, and you credit the cost of goods sold. So take note that adjusting entries for manufacturing are just the same with merchandising. The closing entries for sales and other nominal accounts are similar to what we have done in merchandising. So please take note that the above pro forma entries are just an example, okay? And accounts may change depending on what the business uses. Okay, so as this interest depends on the account of the company that they're gonna use, no? But for our example, this is just a pro forma. Okay, so that ends my discussion this morning. So again, class, thank you for listening.